So Todd is not going to be able to join us, so we could probably dive right in. So why don't we start with introductions? Welcome to those listening to the September 30th Program and Grants Committee. And Liz, I'll start with you.
I'm Liz Blackwell Moore. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Director for Cumberland County Public Health.
Thank you, Pat.
My name is Pat Kimmel. I'm the current chair for the Maine Recovery Council, and welcome everyone.
Thank you, Pat. Maggie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie McLaughlin. I'm a member of the Recovery Council representing one of the litigating subdivisions.
Great. Chastity.
Hey everyone, Chastity Toole, she, her pronouns. I'm the executive director of Maine Recovery Council. And Amber's trying, but she doesn't have Wi-Fi at the moment. So she will hopefully be on soon.
Great. Welcome, Elizabeth. We're just doing introductions.
Oh, okay.
My
Hi,
screen just popped around.
I am Elizabeth Fortier. I am the coordinator for the Recovery Council.
Thank you. Tess.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tess Park, and I'm a person of recovery, and I was appointed by the Attorney General.
Great. Grayson.
Hi there, my name is Grayson Havens, and I'm with the Attorney General's office.
Great. And Melissa.
Afternoon, everyone. Sorry, my internet connection is unstable. Always helpful when it tells you that after everything freezes up. My name is Melissa Hackett. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the policy associate with the Maine Children's Alliance and the coordinator for the Maine Child Welfare Action Network. Very excited to be here with you all.
Great. Thank you. And I'm Joe Everett, the CEO at the Opportunity Alliance, and I chair this committee and am a member of the council. So welcome, everyone. So first up in our agenda, and I'm going to look to Chastity, Elizabeth, Pat, and that's our conversation around the grants management RFP process. So take it away, whoever so feels ready.
I can give an introduction and I'm going to give it to Elizabeth because she has been putting all the scores together. So just for people watching, at our last council meeting, we had voted to rescore the RFP applications we received for the grant management services, as we unintentionally missed one of the applicants and wanted to make sure it was a fair and equitable process. So in doing so, previously the executive committee reviewed and scored, and we chose to send it to program and grants, and the executive committee folks were not part of reviewing and scoring these new scores. So Pat, Joe, and Tess have not reviewed the three of these. The other five, which are not on here right now, both Todd and Amber both provided scores. So we do have scores from all five people, even though they aren't on here. And with that, Elizabeth has put them all together to make it much easier to break down and review.
Thanks, Chastity.
Would it be helpful for y'all? Do you want to do the overall scores of the three, and then we can do breakdowns in the areas? And I can share my screen. I have everything compiled. And I just also want to thank everybody for taking the time to do that. I know, again, everybody's very busy, and scoring RFPs is not a fun process. So thank you to everybody who took the time. So this is, we had our three applicants. So there are three scores. I just have to move you all. So for QQ Research Consultant, their average score was 34.4. For Barry Dunn, their average score was 46.4. And for Public Consulting Group, their average score was 40.2. And as Chastity said, this is just of the five people who are eligible who did not participate in the previous round. And so we had four areas of scoring: the overall qualification, experience, proposed services, cost proposal, and overall quality. And so happy to go through any of those scores or areas if anybody has any questions. I think for Q research consultants. The biggest area of concern was the cost. This was $1.4 million, from 12,000 hours. All of the reviewers brought that up in terms of the scope of work and whether that was something that the council was looking for, and just the price tag on that, especially with where the council is right now, and whether the other two providers were more in alignment with what the council is looking for, especially at this moment in time. Barry Dunn had $112,000 for 440 hours, and I appreciate whoever this was who wrote this down, so I don't have to pull these up. But was 550,000 for a little under 230,000, or 30,000 hours. So I think the cost was a big question for people, but if there's any areas anybody wants to look at closely, I can bring that up.
Elizabeth, will you say the 3 scores one more time?
Yes,
The final scores?
yes, I should let me make sure I have these right. QQ research consultants was 34.4. And Barry Dunn was 46.4. And public consultant group was 40.2. And that's an average score out of 50.
Thank you.
Yes, Maggie.
Is now the time where, assuming Barry Dunn is the one that moves forward based off of the overarching scoring, if we had any questions about that or things we wanted to clarify where we would discuss it, or is that later in the discussion?
No, now's the time. Let's dig right in.
Okay, can I jump for it? I think one thing that was really interesting looking through the different submissions was the really wide range that we saw in terms of time allocation dedicated to this. And I think that's somewhat correlated with a very wide range that we saw on the cost proposals as well. And I would say that was pretty much like one of the leading distinctive factors between the PCG and Barry Dunn applications. There's a lot of similarities in many ways, and then that was really where it was pretty stark differences. And I think one of my concerns that if we could possibly engage in negotiations would be around some of that time allocation that Barry Dunn was estimating. It felt a little bit small. I think it broke down to about 8 hours a week for this kind of pretty time intensive, heavy lift that was anticipated at the beginning. And so I felt like it was the lowest time allocation amongst all of them. And thought maybe we need more time, maybe 3 times that in the initial period to sort through things. And I did note that they said that they would be willing to go over that at no cost, which is incredibly generous, or at least that was my interpretation of what was written. But sometimes I worry when there is such a big gulf between the anticipated need and the committed need. You want to be in a place where you can hold someone accountable to meeting that bigger need or whatever that the true need is, rather than them offering it up as a nice to have out of the goodness of their initiative. And so I wonder if there is a way to negotiate around expectations for time and see if there is somewhere a little bit more in the range that might match. And I don't have an exact number in mind, but it felt like of the 3, that was really low. And maybe we would need more time investment.
So,
Go ahead, Pat, sorry.
a point of clarification, where it's public knowledge that of the 3 that are here, Barry Dunn is the most familiar with the project. They have worked extensively with the council before. Didn't mean, so that may adjust the hours to they are more familiar with the work that's there than any of the other candidates. So they may be, because again, they've been working with us for 6 months. So the familiarity of that may drive into that. There's certainly, in my mind, no reason you can't negotiate those hours, or simply if you choose them, ask them, why did you pick those hours? What is that? And we can always negotiate more in. And so maybe at that point you look at the hourly rate that they're charging versus the number of hours, if that's a concern. So again, for me, and I've seen all three, I didn't score them because I scored them last time without the one. The thing that is the hour difference, I think, is the familiarity with the project.
Yeah, I really think, Maggie, to your question, that we have to hold them to what they say. I think for a period, because that was the big when we had our first discussion, that was a sticking point for the first review was the discrepancy in hours. So, I think they do a really good job, but I'm also not inclined to say and it's not my decision, but my thought would be to try to have them work within what they proposed, in fairness to the other two really, really good bidders as well. But Chastity, do you have any thought or intel on this? I know you're kind of new to the staff role when this was going on.
Very new to when this was all going on. Honestly, I don't know that I have a whole lot to add into this piece at the moment. And really, I want you all to dig into it, that like raise your questions, concerns, what you liked, what you didn't, that weren't around for the first scoring piece. So that way we know everything is like covered above board, no conflicts.
Liz and Melissa as sort of grant people. Oh, there goes Melissa. Go ahead, Melissa.
You read my mind, Joe. I'll take the nudge. Yeah, I think I mostly want to just like reiterate what Maggie said, which is that when I was reading the proposals, and I appreciate what Pat added, right? Familiarity with the work of the council and may mean, less hours needed on the project, but that was a real wide variation across the three proposals. And I just want to make sure that whatever we move forward with feels to the council like we have a pretty good understanding of the time that's going to be needed to support the work well. And just, I think, would underscore some of the things that Maggie said about like just getting that right from the start so that we have the support that we need for this. And it's clear to the person who is going to be moving forward with this, like the time expectations that we anticipate and that we feel confident that that's going to be fulfilled. So that was the biggest thing to me, was just the sort of the variance in time and interpretation of what would be needed to support what we're asking for.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I think what we were asking for wasn't like getting proposals that were so drastically different. I think I'm aware that it wasn't as clear exactly what we were asking for because in the RFP. And so I feel for the applicants as they were trying to figure out like how much are they asking for? Because I don't, and it's hindsight's 2020, right? Like I think it's like learning for the future, because I do think if I had when I read it, I was like, yeah, but now if I were like the one writing it, I would be like, oh my gosh, I don't know how much they're asking for. So like PCG's their application, really including the parts around having a database and having like a actual tool that can help take in the information. Like I really appreciated that. And I think it's like right now that wasn't cleared, and maybe somebody else, like I did read them last week, so now I'm trying to remember. Maybe somebody else can clarify for me. I don't remember reading that Barry Dunn had like a how were they going to collect all that information? Like, and how were they going to do that? Whereas like PCG has a model for taking in all that information and sharing it out with us. I do think they also added in writing contracts, which wasn't what we asked for. That part I do think was clear. But you know, I think it's I guess it's just a tricky balance. Like, and I also agree that I don't know that exactly, it felt clear to me what we were going to get from from PCG in particular. QQ, I still wasn't clear exactly what we were going to, parts were clear, but then in the budget, it wasn't clear at all how they got to that enormous number. Like those things didn't correlate for me with what they provided as like what they were going to do, and then like up in the scope of services and then the actual budget. I didn't see those things matching, and wrote as much on my reviews. But PCG, I feel like I got a clearer picture of all that we would get, whereas I feel like I'm still left with a little bit of questions of what, and are staff going to be doing, not we, sorry, is staff going to be sort of doing some of the extra stuff? But also, like, I don't know that we haven't come up with a strategic plan of what part is staff doing, what part are we farming out, and what part are we, so that's kind of part of it. So, I mean, I do think building from a smaller base we then have the opportunity to build from it off of what Barry Dunn offers in the first 2 years. Yeah, so I guess maybe I'm not being very articulate here, but I guess I was left, my score obviously matches other people's scores. But mostly, yeah.
No, you're very clear, Liz. And I think that's the kind of the confusion and my point when to Maggie's point about like them proposing their hours. I don't want to disguise like we are short. We do not have enough staff, in my opinion, to run this big initiative. Like Chastity and Pat are running around driving, and we had a long conversation at the governance committee about like Chastity's signing authority, and it just, I don't. I think we're it would be great to develop the muscle that PCG and Prairie Down has, and not that the staff don't have that, but they're also doing a lot of other tasks. So I can't imagine doing another grant cycle, honestly. Like it was so much work for the council members. And, we're volunteers, and I just don't think that it's sustainable to think that these 15 members, some of us will be gone in a year, will ever be able to do that. And we talked in the governance committee Friday just about our reputation. Like people are looking at us going like, you've had this money how long and you're struggling to get it out, and we're pedaling as fast as we can. But I think the range and the scope of the proposals to me I think there was a lot. I liked them all actually. I thought they were all really good. And they put a lot of good thought into them. And I think that the money piece and the hours was very confusing. And then we're going to find ourselves, to Maggie's point, needing more. And I think we need as a committee and the council to come back and say, okay, time out. We need more staff, and we seem to be very reluctant to add staff. I think we're committed to the mission, but it takes people to make that happen. So go ahead, Maggie.
I really agree with what you're saying, Joe. I'd be curious, maybe Chastity, if you have a vision of like how much time, at least at the beginning. I think there were like all the applications had really nice elements to them. One other thing that I think I would raise is which relates to like how we think of our role and what is the strength of the partner that we choose for the vendor management. I really appreciated, I felt like in PCG, the focus on the service delivery as the main goal. And really a little more investment in the technical capacity building and the time on that. There's some clarity around the backgrounds of the team that kind of showed kind of a programmatic and a grants background that focused on that. And I felt like it seemed to me there was a a handover, clearly, like they were focusing on building tools that then our team could choose to take up and manage for the future. So I felt like it, and that's not to say those weren't clear and possible through the other pathways and the other vendors, but it was just articulated very clearly in that application. And I think the challenge in the other space, and would love to see, is if we go with another vendor, trying to prioritize that program delivery as like our number one goal, and financial compliance as important and a very key goal, but not the number one goal. And you never want to be in a place where one is over the other per se, but I think our hope and our intention is to support communities with these funds to roll out. And the financial compliance angle and auditing angle of the financial side is a tool that we need to build and can rely on. But we also, and maybe kind of most importantly, need to build that support and grant management for the delivery of the intention of the funding. And I think that came out in terms of team composition in different ways across the vendors. I felt like in PCGs, it was quite well articulated as the top goal. And then the financial compliance elements of it were in there as well, but not the main driver. And that wasn't as clear in some of the others.
For sure.
What
But Chastity, oh, go ahead, Chastity.
I just wanted, Maggie, what part did you want me to clarify on?
Do you have a sense of like how many hours this is gonna take? Like
Oh,
in
like,
the ballpark.
Don't, and I wish I did, like simply a few examples of just things we've dealt with recently that takes up so much time. Like that contract we had to terminate in so many different ways. So much time has been used up with that. And like, we really aren't even anywhere with it. That was just get the information, do the communication, like looking and reviewing their contracts. Like everybody, including Brendan in some way, used so much time. And all of the reporting, like we're in the period now where most of our contracts, or a good chunk, are like due for their first quarter reporting. And there's two of us, and just about everybody is reaching out, like asking for clarifying questions, wanting to do meetings. And the time that just we put in with everything, I can't imagine how much it's going to be bringing an outside vendor. Like it's going to be a lot, and they're going to have expertise and they can do it. And it's still going to take a lot of our time because there's so many barriers and roadblocks to everything we do that I don't feel I can accurately even guess. Like I think it's much larger than any of us are anticipating what the time's going to be.
Thanks, that's helpful. I think, yeah, that final takeaway of it's a lot is what I'm getting from that, and more than kind of a simple in and out engagement.
And we love Pat, and when Pat finishes her term in a year, the next chair will not spend 40 hours a week. So Pat, what's your thoughts about sort of this? Because you spend a lot of hours. Oh, you're on mute. Or
So in the beginning, I put in more than I do now. I mean, Chastity and Mary both were, getting a little bit more independent. It is a lot of work. The thing is, and that's what I'm sort of looking forward to is the retreat is really defining and figuring out where our goals are as a council and looking at things. I mean, there is also the throw in of I never fully understand where the Moss Center fits into this, which is technically there for our support, for help with evaluation and other things that are there. And that's sort of undefined. And I think that's part of the problem is that things are always sort of left undefined. And all of a sudden, when we find something there, we'll think, oh, I forgot about that aspect. And so then, as Chastity said, then that starts adding up and building up. I mean, there needs to be a real conversation about how work flows And my fear is, I know that more staff is needed, but I think for me to say, and this is just me, before you add more staff on, what exactly will their role be and how does that flow out? Just putting more workers on isn't necessarily the answer, but really defining what work do we want put out? What do we want to evaluate? How do we want to move forward? Those things need to be defined before you say, how many hours is that? I mean, when you look at those hours, Barry Dunn's like, and you say to yourself, that is, seems less, is that enough? But then again, Barry Dunn's been working with us for 6 months and they must think it is possible. And again, I think it goes back to Liz's original thing where she said, it's like, exactly what are we asking of people? And I don't know that we really defined that. That part of that was on us as a council really defined it, because you got 3 different very wonderful proposals, wide range in finance, but again, they all had a different angle they were going at, sort of. So that shows you. Again, there's a lot of work. I'm hoping that with an outside facilitator, we can define more where we are, where our goals are, what we're looking for, timetables, or at least that facilitator get us started in that direction. But it never should any of the council members forget the amount of work you've all put into it. And I think that that last round of grants, and I hate the expression, but I'm going to say it, sort of fried us all. That was a lot of work. That was a huge amount of work for volunteers to do, and we managed to do it. And again, at some point in time, we have to look at finance, because the way our finances are handled, it's just impossible to work with. The hoops that have to be jumped through just to get an already approved contract signed and a check in the mail is just unacceptable. But those are my thoughts. Sorry, long-winded.
Go ahead, Liz, and then Chastity.
Okay, so I guess I like, as we're talking, I'm thinking about a couple things. One, I think I would want to know from Barry Dunn, if we are considering them first, like the number one, they have clearly defined roles and responsibilities, and they say this thing about Barry Dunn will work with MRC to help make sure that each role and the typical responsibilities are fulfilled by either Barry Dunn's project team members or MRC staff. And I feel like we're clear that we don't have the ability for staff to do any additional things, and therefore we're funding it out. And so I guess I'm like, does that mean they built a project based on the fact that 4 of the positions that they mention, they might think staff is going to be doing that, or we're going to hire staff to do that? So that's concerning. And it does go into this piece around, like, so now that I'm like thinking about these things as we talk through it, and thinking about the amount of hours that they determine versus, and then the other thing I'm thinking about is that PCG's proposal was more well-rounded in terms of offering to have a technology that would help us now and in future contracts. I mean, I think we're all talking about how, like, we're all scared to do an RFP process again. And I'm not sure that Barry Dunn's proposal fixes that or helps us with that. And so my sense from reading PCG's was that it might, and I guess I'd be curious other people's read on that.
Chastity.
A couple things. Back to what's been said about the big lift on the last application process is the big lift that it was for the council, and also acknowledging we still haven't fully got through that lift, like with what we have. And I think there's a few things to think about in all of this. In talking about Barry Dunn, I can't help but wonder if some of the stuff is just based on how their previous work was. Like, I can say since I've been here, interacted with them very minimally as I've been onboarding. once I finally did, super helpful, and like they got stuff that we needed. So I don't, I have a hard time envisioning someone wasn't applying more off their experience instead of what was put into them, like of how they were used before. So I think those are fair questions to ask as far as, are you trying to pass back to us or not? Um, and there was something else and I lost it. I'll come back. Sorry.
I'd also mention that I think the Moss Center is doing evaluation, not collecting progress and process measures. And also I think they're not doing evaluation for us. My understanding was they were doing that for the AG's work, not for the ones we funded. So I think this is really different, and coming up with evaluation metrics that are not progress metrics, but like outcome evaluation. I don't know that we've even really tackled that yet. That's kind of like a whole other thing that really is about like, what are our primary outcomes that we think we're going to have in 5 years, 10 years, and looking at that. And that's kind of the work that the Moss Center does, but I don't think they're doing that for us. My sense was we are hiring somebody to do this collecting all the information and doing the progress measures and helping us do that work. And then we can actually figure out, well, what are we collecting? I mean, hopefully we would have done it the other way. What are the outcomes we want to see? I think we all know like generally what outcomes we want to see, but I don't think we chose like 4 outcome measures that we are now saying these projects are going to do. But I think we're going to be able to collect a lot of good information through our process outcomes that one of these firms will help us collect.
Yeah,
questions.
evaluation was separate. Evaluation wasn't part of this one. Also confused on Moss. I mean, and I'm not going to be super helpful in clarifying here, but the way I understand it is their contract, they're supporting municipality, like the AG pay them to support all the other places, and they will be home to the dashboard that will take everybody's reporting. Their contract doesn't specifically fund them for us.
Yeah, that's right. I think, Liz, back to your question though about Barry Dunn, I think they do think their staff. Like, I think that it was a Herculean, everyone, all the staff that worked on it, including the volunteers, and Pat as the volunteer chair did a lot, and Gordon did a ton. So I think they did respond to it thinking their staff. And Pat, to your point, and I don't know if we can front load this because I certainly have ideas around staff. Like if we would have been able to start a private entity for the Maine Recovery Council, we all know, I mean, we'd have a grants management department. We'd have evaluation. I mean, we may have to consult it out, but I think we know the limbs on the tree that we would need. And I think that that's missing. And I think we're not going to be able to, like, so this is to Liz, to your question too. Like, I look through this through a very like grant management lens, which is like really this, it's big, but it's also, we're absent. We have a whole infrastructure absent. So they can come in and do whatever, but it's not really the everything. So, you know, I guess as we shove off, we shouldn't make too long of a commitment to it, because I think that we are changing fast. And if we can get together for a strategic planning session and get some the future clarified, then I think we can be clear with someone helping to manage the grants because it's a very particular expertise that, and also very expensive to bring that level of staff on board. But I think yes, they are looking that there's going to be staff for us to help in my review of the. And with the turnover, now after the first cycle, the second cycle, like people stepping down, like Chastity did, like there's always going to be newcomers to the council that is going to make it, we can't expect people to be on the council for a month and then dive into what we've done. So So what's next, Pat and Chastity? Like, are we agreeing or we're awarding this based on points to Barry Dunn? Do we need to do something to recommend it to back to the council? What's the next step?
So as a subcommittee, as reviewers, everyone on this committee, the conversation today, your role is to make a recommendation to the full council for a vote on it. So you need to come up with a recommendation, and then that recommendation you will present to the full council at the next meeting. And they will either have questions for you or accept your recommendation for the grant management. So you're looking for a motion.
I think
Go ahead, Maggie.
I think before the motion is made, just talking out loud, if it would be possible to say we recommend a discussion with the proposed Barry Dunn to I do feel quite strongly 8 hours may not be enough a week, at least at the beginning, or at some point. And so I do feel like a negotiation around an increase on that, or maybe like setting up milestones where that is renegotiated or rediscussed, but some recommendation around increasing those hours, which I'm sure will have cost associated with it, but getting more in a ballpark that is a higher level of commitment may be worthwhile for embedding in the motion.
So
I guess
Maggie,
I
that's
wonder-
more a contract negotiation versus making a motion to accept the recommendation. You can
guess
make in that
If we're
motion
just
something to
recommending that
say,
it goes as is, I don't feel.
no,
fully
no, no,
comfortable
you can
with
make
that.
a recommendation that this is them and but again, if you don't make a recommendation for them to vote on, their current contract expires when, Chastity?
Today, they didn't use up the contract that the council's had with Barry Dunn. That's been amended and extended multiple times, because we never went through all the funds. It's technically up after today, and they're willing to work with us and extend during the interim period till we choose one of the 3 applicants. So Deb recommended we go to the end of the year to make it easy, so we have someone in that filler.
So I like where you're going, Maggie. I just wonder if that seems fair if I was one of the other bidders.
Yeah, I was gonna sort of say the same thing, like if we're asking them to go up, but we have one that covers more things, that is a higher price, but is also many more hours, should we not be considering that one too? I feel very torn, and I'm hearing, and maybe you're not as torn, I'm hearing that like perhaps. And I guess it would be helpful, I mean, it's too bad that other folks that scored are not here. Because it only leaves 3 of us that scored here, which is that even like a quorum to vote on? If,
The full program committee can vote. It's just like when you voted to accept the grants. All of us didn't ever review all the grants. We heard the conversation, we saw the scores and voted on it. So any member of the Program and Grants Committee, whether they had a chance to score this or not, can vote. That means that Joe, Tess, and I can vote. And we do have the scores included in what Elizabeth gave us in the final tally. So Todd and Amber's scores are
Yeah, no, I realize
included
that.
in there.
yeah, no, I realize that, but we're having a different discussion that includes other information that they're not a part of. So
So I guess based on my experience doing this, and I don't know how you feel, Pat and Chastity, because I wasn't the principal driver of the development of the RFP, but it does seem like we should talk about whether we should interview. I mean, I think we think there's two that could be, if we clarified it, they could be both contenders. I think we are in agreement. Maybe there are two, not three, but is that possible? And I don't want to step on your toes and Chastity's toes because I wasn't part of it, but I think that seems like it might be a next step, which is probably not what we wanted today, but it might be best for the council.
I wasn't part of developing it either, so I don't have any thought on the development part. It started when I started the posting, so I wasn't part of that part. I mean, it's your decision either way. So are you asking to have like a proposal from both Barry Dunn and PCG to come present somewhere, whether full council program and grants? I don't know.
Just want to keep in mind that the reports are due from some of the grantees already. They're coming in. And our current contract for grant management expires. So however long you want to take, that's fine. But know that there will be a lapse in using their services because we won't have a contract, which will slow everything down. But again, it's up to you. I have one vote, but that's it. So I just want you to keep that in mind, that it does slow the process down. You need a full council to vote on that.
I mean, I think we all know that this would slow the process down. I don't think it's more about doing good process. And sometimes it sucks and we have to make hard decisions because we are being held to account for this work. And so I hear you. I also feel like we know that. I think we understand that. And is there a way that we can find I think let's talk about what common ground could we find here where we don't slow down the process so much, but we also do a fair process. I think like asking Barry Dunn to increase their hours and not asking PCG to take out some of the work they had suggested about contracts that we don't actually need and lowering their hours seems unfair to me. So I guess I can't choose that option, where we ask one and not the other. Do we just make a decision today based on what we have here right now? We can also choose that. That's an option. So I think it's like coming up with what are our options and discussing those with the caveat that, of course, yes, one takes more time and one is immediate. Are we okay with that? How do you all feel, Melissa or Tess? Chastity, you obviously have your hand up. I just feel like I'd love to know what others feel, how you all feel.
My hand up is only to clarify. Brendan said only the reviewers should vote. Everyone else should abstain on the recommendation.
But that makes no sense because you didn't do that with the 45 other grants that you reviewed. Just saying.
I can see this either way. I get that. And also, this is a different situation because someone was left out when we originally scored and reviewed these, and we had to do it all over. So, apples to oranges, which also makes it difficult because that puts this whole thing on three of you to make a recommendation to the council.
And if you do it that way, you do have a quorum because you have a quorum and we can abstain.
Tess, you had your hand up, though. Love to hear from you.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I apologize. I was driving when the scores were on the screen. So just asking this question, if you're looking at all of the other areas looking at every single area, was there anything that differentiated the two that we're talking about enough where regardless we would want to move forward with Barry Dunn and then negotiate the hours, or is it they're so comparable that we would need to open it up to have an explanation specifically on the hours? I don't know if I'm asking that question correctly, but because I didn't see the scores, it's hard for me to conceptualize how far apart they are from one another.
Well, I think we also have a dilemma, Pat, and I may be wrong, but we did the three reviewers that did the first round didn't do the other. Like I didn't review, so that's a struggle for me. So I didn't see PCG, and I think
Right.
they're really good. So I think that's where I'm showing up, and I'm not that worried about vote. Like what you're the chair, Pat. We can do whatever we want. We know
Yeah,
we
so
can.
you can determine what you want to do. I did read it, didn't score it, but I did read it.
Okay.
So just so I could be part of the conversation, it's just the way I saw it. If Brendan's saying not, we do have a quorum because again, it's the quorum is who's present and we can abstain. I believe if I'm reading Robert's rules right, Grayson, please correct me if I'm wrong. We're here and can just abstain. If that's the pleasure of the committee, if that's what they want, that's fine with me. I just see it differently than Brendan. Brendan is the council's lawyer, and certainly can go by whatever he says. And I will defer that to the council's, to the grants committee's choice.
Melissa or Maggie, sorry.
I had a clarifying question on those scores. Elizabeth, those final scores, was that only the average of the three of us, or did you factor in the averages from the earlier scoring effort?
This is just from this round, but it's the 5 people. So the people who couldn't be here today, included, so, but
Okay.
it's the 5 people.
Yeah, okay,
So it's a
That's
matter of
very-
public record.
yeah,
So I can say it, the executive committee chose Barry Dunn. That was going to
Right.
be their recommendation until, and again, I'm only saying it because it's public, the meeting was public with the decision. That would have been the recommendation that would have been gone forward until we realized we had a missing applicant.
Which was PC. So
Yeah.
they didn't get read, just to be clear.
Mm-hmm.
And Tess, you asked earlier if there was a big difference in scores in any, among the 3 in any of the areas. And so for the cost proposal, which was out of 10, for the 3, for QQ, their average score was 4.2. Barry Dunn was 9.6, and public consulting was 7. And that was the area that had the largest variance in score, was that
And their
cost.
scores, Elizabeth, so, and Barry Dunn and PCG on an average were 2 points away from one another total. So, I mean, it's essentially, to your point, it was all about the budget being the difference between and not the other parts, which is why I'm particularly concerned with this issue of asking, like, if there were other differences, then I would say like, yeah, okay. But like the only difference was in the budget. And so asking Barry Dunn to change their budget to higher when we have one that is higher, that is more time, feels not right. And so I think like for me, I would either want to vote to say like, we're going with Barry Dunn today, or we're going to do some questions of both organizations. And, you know, yeah, so that's where I stand on that.
Or I
Melissa.
apologize, their overall scores, there was 12-point difference in the average overall scores in the
Wait,
2.
can you say, well, can you tell me their average scores again? Because I thought it was 40 versus 40.2.
It was 46.4 for Barry Dunn and 34.4 for QQ,
Right.
40.2 for public consulting.
Okay, so 6-point difference between.
And I can share this, I can send this rubric around to everybody if you'd
Okay.
like afterwards.
So that is more significant, a 6-point difference.
Go ahead, Melissa.
Yeah, I'm just struggling as one of the 3 people that's in the room that scored without the other 2 people to like vary from the total and what that says. And I would just say for like, have concerns around a lot of the things that Liz just raised about following up and asking people to adjust their proposal and not doing same with the other folks. I just wanted to weigh in because I know I've been quietly listening to other folks, but I'm just struggling with the fact that, you know, 3 of the 5 of us who scored these are here. And if we were going to vary from what the total indicates we should make as a recommendation, I would want those other 2 to be there. That's the part that I'm struggling with.
I guess what I'm struggling with, that if we don't feel like we want to have a part 2 and meet with people for clarity, then I don't think we should be negotiating with Barry Dunn. So to your point, Melissa, about I think it is like they've signed on, that's what they're gonna do. And like we're gonna be able to staff it to the like
Agreed.
this is very different. Like the PCG that got missed, this is a very different situation than we're used to. So I think that if we want to vote for Barry Dunn today, which I can live with that, I think with that it has to be what it is, and then we'd be living within their proposal. They'd be living within it, which may not serve the council well. But I think this is, it's or we may have to do something. But I don't feel right. I don't think it's fair if we don't have an opportunity for both of them.
I agree.
Same.
I
So that
don't
leaves-
feel comfortable moving
Sorry,
forward
go ahead,
as
Meg.
is with that recommended, like with the one. So my suggestion would be to go back and offer an opportunity for clarification, and revision based off of clarification.
Wait, can you repeat the first part? Because I was saying something and I didn't hear. So you're not comfortable going forward with Barry Dunn as is?
Correct.
Okay.
Pat, go ahead.
I just want to say that I agree with Joe. Barry Dunn submitted a contract, and they said they could do the work. And if you read the proposal, that's the work they said they could do, and that's the hours that they said they could do it within. That you hold them to that. Again, contracts are always renegotiated. Any of them could have either underbid or overbid a project. But the point is, they submitted something. Unless you're going to go and open up questions and allow all 3 bidders to be able to clarify and do questions, I think that you take the proposal as they said. They said they could do it within that time frame, and if you read their proposal, I think they're pretty clear as to what they were willing to do in that time frame. But I'm just agreeing with Joe.
So Maggie, do you want to say more where you're at? And Melissa, Liz, I think it's really important. And Tess,
I think part of my struggle is I really value the direction or from the team that's been doing this work. We have had transitions, which is like why a lot is still unknown as well. So it is hard. I wish Cassidy could and Elizabeth and Grayson and everybody could weigh in and vote. I think that would have a lot of weight with me on each of those elements. I am thinking about it in the long term. And long term, I think the commitment to get the robustness of what we need done is better reflected in the hours represented by PCG, as well as the range of the team that's represented. And so that's why I feel a little bit uncomfortable moving forward as is with something that I think is not yet commensurate with the need of building out so much work for us.
Tess.
Yeah, just listening to this conversation when we were all discussing what we need out of this, there was so much variance. And I think based on the variance of what was given in the proposal indicates that the RFP was not clear, which makes sense when we can't even articulate what we need. So I hate to say this, but I feel like and I don't have a vote in this, but just like after this conversation, I'm almost feeling like, was this RFP even, I don't want to say legitimate or accurate, but like, was it even really reflecting or trying to garner responses of what we truly need? And then bringing up, the fairness, not having that clarity. I think Liz, maybe you had mentioned this, like, how are you supposed to respond to something if it's not clear what you're responding to? So that just kind of brings up a red flag for me with this process.
So Melissa, I'm going to call you and Liz. I want to, oh, then I'll go back to you, Maggie. But Melissa,
No pressure. Thanks, Joe. Um, yeah, I'm struggling with the same things, and I'm reluctant to make a recommendation that doesn't have all three of the folks who scored it who were in the room in support of that. I'm really wrestling with it. I feel like if all five of us in the room who scored it, we could have more of a discussion of like beyond the score, right? Are there considerations for what we might recommend? Based on the discussion that we had here today, but since two of those folks aren't here, I'm feeling uncomfortable having had them scored it, but not be part of the discussion about the recommendation we're going to make to the council, particularly that the folks who did score it or are hearing the discussion are wrestling with, it's not a clear recommendation, right? So that's what I'm struggling with, that two of the five people who scored it, I just have their numbers. I don't have their discussion to factor into what we might recommend to the council.
thank you, Melissa. Liz,
Well, and yes, all those things, and that Maggie's not comfortable moving forward with it as is, which then I like, so that's then another one of the three who's saying like they're not gonna vote, if I'm hearing you correctly. And so but I don't have the answer for what to do instead. I really don't, and yet I feel really very torn here, because I agree with Maggie that we need robustness. There's so much need to what we have, as you said, Tess. Like everybody was saying, there's so many needs for how we move this stuff forward. Well, so Maggie, you were gonna say something. I'm gonna pass it to you.
I was just gonna echo, like, hindsight's 2020. It feels more like an EOI than an RFP. Like, we weren't sure fully what we needed, and we got three different solutions. Unfortunately, like, unless we go back and go through an EOI process, which will take much, much longer.
What's EOI stand for, Maggie?
An expression of interest. So it's like, less guardrailed and more like, tell us your ideas. Yeah.
so is middle ground, and I don't want to do this to us, but I think that is middle ground to call another, and Pat, I'm also not, this is showing up in this meeting, but you're the chair, so I'm not stepping on your toes. Should we schedule because we have to notice a meeting even to get together to talk about it again? Should we schedule another meeting with the group and really ask for everyone to be in prep? Because I think at some point everybody who's touched it has to talk about it. Like this is our responsibility. So is that possible, Pat?
It's all possible. Wouldn't be my recommendation, but it's all possible. You can determine that you can't make a decision. And so you determine that. The full council turned it over to the Program and Grants Committee to make a recommendation. Your recommendation is to not move forward. And that, yes, you would have to indeed you have to first decide what you're even asking at this point, because I'm not even sure what you're asking, other than you're putting this on hold. Um, again, so you'd have to do that, and then that would have to go out 14 days. And then you'd either have to call an emergency council meeting, or you would have to wait until October for that to be awarded. And remember, when you say that, contracts take a long time. So you're pushing it and you're pushing it out. And in the same breath, I hear you say, and I'm a little frustrated, I hear you say how overworked the staff is. And what you're going to do right now is add more burden. I understand that you're making the responsible decision. I get that. I'm just getting a little protective, I think, maybe, of the staff and the work that they put into it. When the RFP went out, nobody complained that it wasn't right enough. Nobody complained anything. And now all of a sudden we're backtracking and moving forward. But I'm just a little frustrated. This committee, I applaud you. I applaud your diligence and your fairness, and you will just have to come up with the decision. And I will vote as one member, not as the chair. I'll vote as one member of this committee, but you do have to go through the process, and that will be, you have to figure out why you're holding this process up, exactly what you're asking, and then you will have to have another meeting in 14 days.
Thank you, Pat. Liz.
Because this is public, I just have to say, I just fundamentally disagree with the argument that we aren't thinking about staff. I actually think the total and utter opposite is true, and that I'm concerned that if we choose one that only has provided us with 8 hours worth of work each week, that the staff are still going to be completely overburdened, as is the council members, because we aren't beefing it up enough to do that. So I just fundamentally disagree with you. And I also feel like you're making this as if we want to make this decision. I don't want to make this decision. I would love to decide on one right now. And I'm actually quite upset that you would frame it that way in a public meeting. So I understand we are making hard decisions and it sucks. And I think we should continue to talk through how can we make a decision that has the least amount of harm for staff and for those who put in time and effort to put in a proposal, and those who we are accountable to, which are people who've been impacted by the opioid epidemic, in which we've said we will be responsible for those funds and for our commitment to funding them in the right way. So I think let's hear some more, like how can we make this work? What else could we be doing here? And maybe the three of us who have to vote, we should consider what should we do right now in this meeting to move this forward.
And can I let Tess speak first, Liz?
Please.
She had her hand up, yes, but then hold your thought. Go ahead, Tess.
My one question, and if this is okay to ask, for Chastity being on here, could you give us an honest answer of how either direction would impact you and staff?
Fully, I mean, honest, yes. Fully aware, I don't know. I think to put it off short term, there's going to be a lot of struggle because it's going to really put it out. So next several months, adding to the burden. Depending on which way, if you chose either one right now, one is going to create a lot of more work up front in like integrating with someone who doesn't know the council, know our barriers. So there's challenges with every decision. So it's honest, but it's not fully thought out because there's going to be challenges either way. And I don't know. And I very honestly am very concerned if we don't make a decision because of our mess up in the first place.
Okay, back to Liz, Maggie, Melissa as the people who scored it the last round. Maggie, I'll look at you. I won't pick on Melissa this time. I'll go to you.
I'm struggling because my recommendation is not for the one that scored the highest amongst all of them, and I haven't heard anything to shift that per se, and so I don't feel like I can recommend the one that scored the best, but the people who perhaps scored it but that way aren't here, and so I don't feel like I can recommend that moving forward right now. And I appreciate the fairness of the process. If I had to move forward right now, it would be with the kind of middle ground option.
Thank you. Melissa.
Maggie said exactly what I would have said. I'm struggling because I would recommend PCG myself, and there are two people who scored these who are not here. And I don't want to usurp their scoring authority or whatever it is that they put into I don't have their insight in this discussion or know if this conversation might have tilted their opinion of what to recommend. I'm concerned about the capacity of the Berry Dunn proposal and our ability to influence that at this point. And I see the pros of that proposal, certainly. But if you just asked me as one person to make a recommendation, I would have recommended PCG, and I'm struggling to do that in the absence of other two people who scored these proposals.
Liz, any last words?
I think my scores were very similar between PCG and Barry Dunn, and so I could have really gone either way. But I did have concerns with each of them. Barry Dunn's being that I thought it was not enough hours, and PCG's that they had put in some additional elements that we didn't really ask for or need right now. So I have issues with both of them and was hoping that there would be a robust conversation to help us figure out what to do. And because the two others on this call would not vote for them, then I feel like it's an obligation of mine not to do that without the other two here. And I totally am super sympathetic to the fact that this puts additional you know, burden on Chastity and Elizabeth. And I wonder if at our meeting next week, we can do another contract extension with Barry Dunn until we figure this out so that we don't put you in that position. And that may not be possible, but I guess I'm throwing that out as another option so that we aren't putting more of a burden on you.
Oh, go ahead, Maggie.
And I also wonder, like, what are the obligations that we have that are kind of statutory versus what are the obligations that we have that are want to have? So like, if some of the analysis of the reporting isn't statutory, then, you know, maybe we take some of that off and we just say it's not going to happen this cycle, or some of these other things. And those are the votes we can make to lessen the burden. But I think of the role of the vendor as being the kind of key piece that bridges us to a sustainable structure. And therefore, I don't want to make a decision based off of the next needs of the next 2 months. I want to make a decision that's based off of where we will be in 3 years.
Yeah, I think that unfortunately, this is the result of what has happened. I mean, had we all seen all three of them, so it's unfortunate, but I think we find ourselves in a place that we missed a proposal, and I think it's publicly playing out, and I'm sure that our friends are listening to this conversation. So I really feel like, it's landed here because of timing, but I think that, Pat, it doesn't seem like we're going to have a yes vote today. Um, so like what are we thinking in terms of the next step that's fair to the bidders and to the staff?
Question for Maggie and Melissa is, do we feel like we want the other two folks involved, or are we recommending that we do some provide asks for some negotiating changes to the two proposals that had the highest scores? I guess I don't know what you all are thinking about it. Because it doesn't seem like just adding in the two other people is going to like change the opinion necessarily that you have. And so is that the answer, or is the answer to ask for additional information, give them a week to do that or 2 weeks, and in the meantime schedule a meeting for 2 weeks from now and move things along with the 5 of us who did score the proposals?
Pat,
To the fairness of all the bidders, my suggestion would be that you have a question or adjustments that you want to see and give them to all 3 bidders. Ask them the same questions and then ask them to submit their responses to you, and then you have a meeting to discuss what they're. But again, you have to be fair, unless you're willing at this point to narrow it down to 2 and discount 1. But you need, in order to be fair, you need to submit question to them in advance and give them ample time to be able to respond and adjust their bids accordingly.
Thoughts about that plan? I'm a big fan of follow-up questions, and I think that in a state RFP, you never get a chance. So I think because we probably don't have time to interview people, we'll never get that coordinated. But do people like the idea of follow-up questions? And what would that look like for you guys that have a lot more experience with this?
I would support follow-up questions to all three of the bidders. To Liz's earlier question, I don't think just having the five of us in discussion
Mhm.
will alleviate that. I think it would just contribute to the discussion and make me feel less maybe anxious about the three of us making a choice on behalf of the five of us. I think that I would struggle to come up with those questions right now, Joe, but I do think we've raised some capacity questions, some specificity around scope of work that we could follow up on and ask clarification for. And I just want to echo what others have said. I'm really struggling with not being able to provide the recommendation back to the council so that there's not some kind of a gap. I feel all of those pressure points, and I also want to make sure that we do a contract that's going to support the needs of the council in the long term. So I would support follow-up questions to all three of the bidders, and I don't know if we need to come up with those questions right now, but would be welcome to sorting those through with folks if they have ideas about what those are.
So I think since we're a little bit over, I think if we could work on sending those questions to you, Chastity or Pat, which like I think I can uh, think about it and get a couple questions going. But do we think like 3 questions max? We don't want to like burden people that they're already not sure. Go ahead, Maggie.
I think it's the people who have the questions need to develop those questions. If they're uncomfortable with the voting, that they're searching for things like Maggie is questioning about the hours. Again, I think that, and you don't have to do it at this meeting. You can certainly email those questions that you have to Chastity and we can coordinate those so that they all get those questions. But the questions really need to come from the people who are questioning the proposals. I don't think you can leave that just up to Chastity. I think that
No, I was.
yeah. So that's my suggestion. If for the sake of time, if they wanted to submit their questions, Chastity can somehow, you can do an email chain, knowing that when that email chain can be requested as Freedom of Information Act. But I think that's the fastest way to do that. Chastity can coordinate them and then send it to the bidders.
Quick question, does this meeting go till 5 today?
Well, we would rather just have an hour because
Oh,
of
because I got our calendar invite said 3 to 5, so I thought it was till 5. Because I do believe we should be thinking about the questions here in this space before
Okay.
because actually it's not just a freedom of information like request, it's more that we're not supposed to do that kind of questions without public viewing. So I think if people have time, if we could just come up with a couple questions that we have right now, that I think would expedite this action.
Maggie.
I would agree with Liz. Like, I think more than 2 people need to weigh in on the final questions, which we make it a council meeting and we're not noticing it. So it's better that we just do it here if we are going to go with the questions. If we do go with that route, I would recommend we honestly just keep it very simple and say give us greater justification around why you selected the hours that you selected and why you didn't think more or less would be appropriate. So because I think that's where the bulk of our discussion has been around. The other option that I'm not sure is possible, but to move this from A to B, could we recommend that 2 out of the 3 bidders go to the full council and the final full council makes the vote on which one with the as is bids as they are? Because I think we have discussed certain elements of the applications, but not all of them. And I think that privileges certain information for certain bidders who heard more about their own application or about the competitor's application. And I think that in and of itself is challenging. And so we could also then just recommend it go to like final vote at full council if it's possible. I'm not sure because of process that this lives in both council process and RFP process, what would be possible.
Right, and I would say next week is the meeting, and so and I would be perfectly fine moving forward with just 2 of the 3, because for me, the other one was so not even in the running. In terms of, I had actually multiple issues with it, not just budget. I thought they had some good ideas, but in terms of like how that would be played out, I would be fine moving forward with just 2. And I love this idea because in the end, the council is all voting. Like the council's voting. And if we aren't sure, I would much rather have the council vote on that. So it's the full members accounting for using the proposals as is with our follow-up questions and everybody voting with all the knowledge. And it could be whoever we see how many can read them. And in that time frame, and it's not impossible to read these in a week. Like it's, it would take folks an hour to read 2 of them.
Thank you. Let's Maggie and then Tess.
I think you mean me, Joe. Maggie and
Oh,
Melissa
sorry,
get
Melissa.
confusing.
Sorry,
It's okay.
Melissa, yeah.
It's okay. I just respond to Maggie, and I'm sure Maggie will respond to Melissa. Maggie, I'm so glad that you brought that up because I was wondering if that was a wild idea, but I was thinking same. Like if we're stuck and we don't want to delay this and create a gap, is there an opportunity to bring this back to the full council? I would support further consideration of how to do that. And I agree with Liz. I think, the challenges that we've weighed out are between the top 2 scorers, and I would support taking that in whatever scope and scale we need to back to the council to then be able to take a full vote on it. Most of what I'm really struggling with here today is there's 3 of us making a decision and 2 of the other people who scored it are not here to sort of counter any of my thinking about why to go with one or the other.
Thank you, Melissa. Tess.
I'm just thinking, all of the respondents submitted submitted a response to us, and they used what was in the RFP to sort of envision what we need. So I think if we're going to be asking them questions of, could you elaborate more on the hours, but all they really have to go on is what's in the RFP, I would just be thinking, like, as a respondent, that would be really challenging. It would be kind of, throwing a dart, like, well, I hope I'm going to get this right with the hours, when it sounds like there really isn't clarity of what we really need. And I don't mean to bring this up again. I'm just thinking a respondent watching this and then responding to new questions with no more clarity of what exactly we're asking for would be really hard.
Thanks, Tess. Pat.
My question is for Grayson and for Chastity. The agenda for the meeting has already been posted. And if you're all comfortable that somehow, if we're going to do that, there won't be advance notice to the public but I think it's within the realm of changing the agenda. I just want you to know the agenda has already gone out and been posted on the site. And this would be an added item to that agenda. And I can't remember off the top of my head, Chastity, if there was a whole lot on that agenda to begin with, because this would take up at least an hour, if not more. If the discussion is robust here, it's certainly not going to be less with 15 people. So Chastity, for meeting management, how much time do you think, do we have the hour to spare?
Yeah, I don't think we had a ton on the agenda. And also we kept the agenda kind of broad and
Yeah, we
only
did.
did details of what we needed to, so it could fit. Sorry, I just
And
need to look
Grayson,
and see what
can
the
you
motion was.
can you put an amended agenda and post it now?
Yeah, the only things that we wouldn't be able to do that with would be like bylaw changes and things that are like that
Okay,
explicitly have to have 2 weeks notice, but I can amend it.
okay. So if it's the pleasure of this group, I think I'd be more comfortable with posting an amended agenda onto the site.
Great. Liz.
And I just want to say, I feel like we had, like, the RFP wasn't like so unclear. It's more that the scope of what we were asking for was felt more unclear. Like, I think there was clarity on like what, just not how much, and of each thing. And so I think that's what we got, is like different versions of how much. And so it's not, and I think it's like hard for us to have known how to scale that in the proposal without perhaps a little more work that we're going to do in January around strategic planning. And so it's just like a little bit of, we're trying so hard to get us staffed up and have enough. And so I think it's just like we didn't quite hit the mark on that. But I think that knowing from folks how they justify their hours, I think could be helpful. Like, how do you think you're going to do what you've proposed in the hours that you have? Or I liked actually the way Melissa suggested the question. Just give us the justification for your hours, because both of those didn't have a lot of meat in the justification of their hours. So I think it's a reasonable request to ask them for a little more meat of how they will do the tasks that they outlined in their scope of services within the hours. And then if everybody's reading that and read the proposals, I think we won't go into the spiral again of like, well, how much are they going to do? What are they offering? And so we'll have that clarity from them. And hopefully the whole council will be able to make a decision instead of me and Melissa and Maggie making the decision for a 15-member council. That's has a lot of ramifications for the next 3 years.
Okay, so just to summarize where we're at. So we're going to send one question to PCG and Barry Dunn. Is that accurate? And Chastity, you have that question?
Are you denying the third bidder? Are you saying the third bidder is out? Then I would recommend that you ask Chastity to, I'm sure they're listening, but ask Chastity to propose a letter thanking them very much for their bid. But at this point, we're narrowed it down to 2 bidders, and they weren't them. And if that letter could go out before the public meeting, I think that would be a good idea.
Sound good, Chastity? Okay, down to 2 bidders. So we reach out to them with the question around justification for their hours.
Yeah, I think just make it optional of like, if you have anything additional you would like to add about justification for your hours, please let us know send it in by this date, and then we can factor that in. But if they choose that, what they submitted is what they don't want to elaborate further, then that's fine as well. And that's what we'll base final decisions on.
And we will send the council the proposal so they will have a chance to read the 3 proposals. 2, sorry, 2, yes, my error. And then we will get that back. That'll be a tight turnaround. Well, I suppose it's only Tuesday, so they have a little more than a week if we get that out today or tomorrow.
And be
Sure.
good to
Yeah.
be good to Tess, because Tess is chairing that meeting.
No, I think we've reached a good place. I mean, it's an unfortunate, we didn't pull back the whole RFP because we forgot some, I think there's a lot of, we have to sort of get to the finish line in a very careful way and deliberate way. So no recommendation, Pat, from this, we have our plan. We're not submitting a recommendation. We'll let the board know or the council know what's happening, Chastity or Pat, I guess.
Yeah, Chastity and I will talk about it. We'll send it out um, with an email to that decision to the full council.
Great.
Can I ask
Liz.
a
So they're aware.
sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Chastity, go ahead.
So in sending the materials out to the full council, are we having people score or just have the materials to discuss? Because at this point, we have all of executive committee has not scored one of these. And then there's like 4 or 5 council members that have not read or scored, period. And it sounds like we have time, but it will be very difficult to get that information back from people in time. Like we didn't get all of these back till today and the same last time, day of.
Do they need to score it or just read it?
That's what I want clarity on.
Is that a Brendan question?
It feels like to me that people could take our scores that we have from this, the 5 scores we have, read the proposals, read the responses from the folks, and we have a discussion about it. I feel like I'm not comfortable making a decision, 3 people for 15. And so I think that it's like, hey, you've got all this information. We don't need more scores, but people can then vote themselves. So it's not us voting for everybody. I think that's my goal anyway, is to have it be a broader. And so I don't know that we need scores if we already have scores, because we're saying we're not making a decision. We'd like you all to make it with this information that we all have. Is that okay does that sound okay, Chastity? And I just want to say I appreciate us being able to work through this really hard. And I appreciate us being able to work through to find like where are all the harms in this and figuring out how we can come to a place where we feel like we still get a decision that's in a timely manner for everyone involved. So I appreciate us everyone being able to work through that.
Definitely. Okay, so no special meeting. We'll be bringing it to the council. We do have a number of other sort of items that will sort of take up our next agenda. And Shasta, you and I can touch base. There was a lot of like staff we're going to do from the July meeting, and it's been great, so busy. So let's take stock, Chastity, and then we can work on the agenda for the next meeting based on what's happening with you and your starting this new job of only a few months ago. So we'll work on the next agenda with some of the July carryover stuff. And I think that's it for the meeting.
Perfect.
Thank you, everyone. It's a grueling, but I think we did get to the best place.
Okay, bye all.
Bye, everyone.